Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
I guess it was born out of my own perfectionism. I mean, I've had this perfectionism about patient experience and patient care and never really felt like I was able to do medicine in a way that was remotely helpful for people.
Today we're joined by Dr. Natalie Davis, a seasoned pediatrician and a pioneer in virtual primary care. With her 18 years of medical practice, she's been at the forefront of digital health, earning the title of, quote, the first iPhone doctor. Dr. Davis is the co-founder of PreventScripts, an initiative that's redefining preventative care and scaling behavior change in primary care. Her work has delivered a remarkable 5-to-1 return on investment for stakeholders. She's also played a key role in expanding physician networks for health startups like Doximity and HealthTap.
I started to just think, wow, wouldn't it be great if I could do house calls? And I did some focus groups with my patients, and I just happened to be in the kind of neighborhood where you could actually do concierge medicine. And that was sort of my first foray into entrepreneurship.
We are super excited to have Natalie on the show today, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome to this week's episode of Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, and Nerd MD's podcast. And we have the pleasure of having Dr. Natalie Davis here to learn a bit about her and the background and some of the things she is trying to fix in healthcare. So welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thanks so much. Great to be here, Dale and Adam, today, and have enjoyed meeting you both.
Awesome. No, it's going to be fun to have a more formalized conversation that we can then share with others. So looking forward to this. Let's kick off. We always like to hear about our guests' kind of origin story and, their why and that sort of thing. So, I think, the typical phrase, where did you come from? Where did you go? We'd love to hear a bit about who is Natalie.
Great. Well, I'm Natalie Davis. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of PreventScripts, and I am originally from Kentucky. I am actually a 5-generation Western Kentucky native, and I sort of say that with pride. And I was sort of raised, upper middle class family, Western Kentucky. I don't know, what do we call these? The good old days. My grandfather was a farmer, my mother's father, and so he would come into the house and carrying these giant grocery bags of vine-ripened tomatoes that he picked, and we grew up with those vine-ripened tomatoes lining our countertops, and we ate them like they were apples. And, I guess sort of looking at my family, I can look back on us now and say, well, yeah, we were kind of health nuts. My father was a cyclist, and I wasn't an athlete. I was sort of a, dance nerd, theater kid. Started cycling, but we were always active. My brothers were Eagle Scouts. I grew up camping and rappelling and doing literally Eagle Scout things. And I come from a family of engineers, rather than physicians. And so, it was all about sort of math and calculus and, growing up in science. And when I was sort of deciding what to do for medical school, for college, I just really wanted to think of what is the hardest thing I can do. I mean, I obviously wanted to help people. I mean, I sort of take that as a given, but I wanted to do something that was hard. And so as I was thinking through that, I was like, yeah, I think I can be pre-med. I'll be pre-med. That's the hardest thing I can think of. It was the hardest thing I could think of at the time. And I went through and went to University of Kentucky for medical school and had some incredible women mentors there that really were pediatricians, that helped me formulate my direction. And that is how things started with me.
Oh, that's great. At what point did you, I mean, obviously you considered this like pre-med thing as something that was going to be challenging to you, but at what point did you start to make that, did you make that decision? Was that in high school, or were you kind of contemplating that even before?
Well, I sort of hedged my bets. I was a musician. I was a clarinet player, and I went in pre-med, double major, pre-med and music. I almost went to University of Louisville, but something affected me in my interview. I saw some trash on the street or something. It was like something like silly. I was like, I'm not going here. I'm going to University of Kentucky. But I really had this concept of a dual path, right? Like I'm going to try music. Let's see how that goes. Maybe I'll be good enough. But I'm, want to try science too, because, I was good at science. I could do it. I could learn it. And so I did both paths, and I thought, well, I'll go all the way through and just see what happens. I played in Carnegie Hall with my wind ensemble my junior year of college, and so I was decent. But I played in a kids camp. I think it was a summer before my senior year, and I was prepping to take the MCAT. And I spent my summer playing with these musicians from Scotland and England. And these guys could just transpose music. I mean, these were like the Juilliard kids, And I just thought that towards the end of that summer, and I was all set up to take the MCAT, and I thought, if I do decent on this MCAT and I can get into medical school, I'm going to quit this music thing, because there's no way I'm good enough to do this music thing. Because, if you look at the city of St. Louis, how many clarinet players are there? Well, there's 2, How many doctors are there in a city the size of St. Louis? However many, tens of thousands. So I just thought the odds were kind of stacked against me on doing music. And so I just did well on the MCAT. I was accepted to medical school, and that just changed my path right there.
Yeah, very cool. Now, have you obviously mentioned that you were one of the co-founders of PreventScripts? When did you, at what point in because you mentioned you're a pediatrician as well. So at what point during your medical school life or your physician life did you start to contemplate entrepreneurship and, creating something that was going to hopefully, to fix a problem that you were seeing?
When I started out and I was in medical school, I had a great mentor, Nima Desai, who was a neonatologist at University of Kentucky. And she told me, don't stay here. Don't do your residency here. Get into the best residency you can get into. And I was thinking about pediatrics. I really loved OB. I really loved trauma surgery also, for some reason. And when I decided to do pediatrics, I just took her advice. I said, okay, I'm going to interview at all the top children's hospitals. Let's just see what happens. And I really hit it off with my program director, Jim Keating at St. Louis Children's Hospital. I just had a great interview, and I thought, I just love this guy. He's so smart. He's got it going on. I thought, wow, if I could get in, I would go here. And so that's where I ended up matching. And I wanted to stick somewhat close to home. I was really sort of enamored with, Seattle Children's and Emory and some of my other interviews. But I remember Children's in Seattle, the ER looked like a spaceship back in those days. I remember thinking, wow, this is pretty slick out here. But I ended up staying in Kentucky. But I had really no inkling of entrepreneurship. I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur at the time. I really kind of was, but I started in a large multi-specialty group after residency. And that was fine. And I did that for 7 years. At some point, I sort of started noticing, okay, my overhead is, so 75%, I'm taking home 25% of this money, and my overhead percent was just wildly high. I was in a practice in St. Louis. I was in a swanky neighborhood with a really expensive rent in St. Louis, across from the Ritz-Carlton in Clayton, Missouri. So I probably had the most extreme example of, not the best business situation. And I started to just think, wow, wouldn't it be great if I could do house calls? And, I did some focus groups with my patients, and I just happened to be in the kind of neighborhood where you could actually do concierge medicine. And that was sort of my first foray into entrepreneurship, was, sort of testing the market. I had a lot of twins and a lot of triplets and a lot of, busy families, busy two working parent families. And that was my first. I had a laptop and a Trio, and I actually installed Office Practicum on my IBM ThinkPad myself. I really wanted to go electronic, was the other thing. And in my particular practice, it just wasn't possible. We had sort of this option to go to Epic, and I just could not get the buy-in. I wanted to do it. I was ready to go because I had a couple friends in Kentucky that had converted to EHRs, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't make it happen. And so that was the other thing that sort of played into that decision to do something on my own. And so that was sort of my start as an entrepreneur.
And then, so along that progression, once you started doing these kind of initial tests in the waters, house calls, when did you start to get this idea, or concept around PreventScripts, and maybe you can explain a little bit what that does, and and how that has kind of tied in with your kind of evolutionary why throughout your life.
Yeah. Well, it was really, I guess it was born out of my own perfectionism. I mean, I sort of have had this perfectionism about patient experience and patient care, and never really felt like I was able to do medicine in a way that was remotely helpful for people. And so, I was thinking about experience. What would be the best, experience for a mom and their babies? Well, obviously it would be for the doctor to come to the house. And that is how that sort of all came together. My grandmother got sick, and we ended up moving back to Kentucky. And around that time, I got a call from the Mayo Clinic. They're doing this, Transform Symposium, and they said, well, we're looking for, someone to come and talk about customer experience in healthcare. And so, making house calls was probably at that time a great, example of a doctor doing something that's best for patients. And getting back to Kentucky, I would sit in these rooms, in boardrooms. You guys have been in these boardrooms. You know what these rooms are like. And people are talking about, what can we do? What can we do for people? What can we do for patients? And I would sit in these rooms, and ideas would be thrown around like, well, let's get the wheelchair over to the elevator when the patient's coming out to be discharged, and put them in the wheelchair very seamlessly and wheel them out to their car in a seamless manner. And, I'm a pediatrician, having, done this house call practice. I'm thinking, this is insane. We need to be doing a lot better. We need to be doing, so if you look at the sort of the context of trying to do things better, if you're inside the four walls of the hospital, of any building, and that's your context, then you've missed the mark, because people don't live in our hospitals. They live in their own homes. And I was really struck in this rural community. I sort of went from the most affluent community of St. Louis to the most rural community in Kentucky. And I was practicing in a rural county. And I just noticed these families, they don't drink any water ever. They don't have any vegetables at all. So this was sort of this cognitive dissonance in the way I was raised, sort of health nutty, in the 80s, family, and with families that, are not walking at all in a not drivable, not walkable neighborhood, horrible. The worst, if you could sort of imagine the worst food desert that you could imagine in your mind, and it's, worse than that, families driving past 20 fast food restaurants on their way to get back to their house. And so that was really sort of the big idea. The mobile was kind of coming together, and I had sort of rigged up my iPhone to run my practice off of it in St. Louis, and sort of e-commerce was coming together. A lot of things were really coming together. And I just noticed a patient using one of the consumer apps and having a little success. But what was exciting to me was this excitement the patient had, sort of like a light bulb. If you could almost see a light bulb on the top of someone's head, this idea of, wow, this is a person that was never engaged in their health at all. And all of a sudden, the light bulb, you can see it over their head. And so that very quickly I noticed I didn't provide any of that value. This consumer company provided that value. And that I sort of felt like I was on the outside of the life of the patient. And I started to think, what is it that we want people to do? We want people to drink water. We want people to eat more vegetables. We want people to eat fruit. We want people to walk, depending on who you read, 6,000 steps a day or 10,000 steps a day. And I started to think of how simple and easy those behaviors would be to track. And that the literature was starting to support self-tracking, mobile self-tracking. Lots of literature was coming together, but there was no way for providers to monetize it at the time. This was just sort of an idea, and we built the mobile apps, and my team came together. And then in 2019, the remote monitoring codes, they were already in play, but they were sort of liberalized in terms of who can do these visits. And that was the year CMS changed to, we might not need the highest level providers doing the visits, but literally, a lower level provider can do these visits. And that was sort of the year that sort of ushered in this new business model for providers. And so it was really around just an outrage that I had over death and disability in my community, which was a stark change moving back from St. Louis, cushy neighborhood in St. Louis, to the worst of the worst. And I didn't recognize people. I didn't recognize friends, because people have gained, 60 pounds, 80 pounds. And just the disability, all the while, the service lines are cranking, right? You guys know about the service lines, the service lines are cranking because the disease is so bad. And I just couldn't stand it. And it felt like, I felt very lonely, because I felt like, why is this okay with everybody? Everybody's okay with this. And it wasn't okay with me.
Yeah, you can see the passion and emotion and hear the passion and emotion in your voice around that. I think, coming back, you describing going away for your training, continuing your starting your practice there, and then coming back home and seeing this kind of firsthand, I'm sure was extremely eye-opening. And I think you'd be interested. I think we should kind of delve into that a bit. I think there's not a lot of chatter, I would say, about kind of rural healthcare as much as I think there probably should be. And I'll be first to admit, I grew up in the suburbs. There was rural folks, I think, in the area I grew up in Northern California, to go out, and they came to my high school as well. But I think there's some unique challenges, with rural medicine.
Yeah, along the same lines, we talk a lot about, technology solutions for different use cases, but clearly there are some different unique problems posed in rural primary care. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think about it, and, how technology can really take a look at that area to help, all people?
I think so. I believe I told both of you guys, and I'll tell anybody that will listen to me this, that our primary care spending where I live in Kentucky is, if you look at the latest scorecards, depending on which scorecard you're looking at, but it's something in the order of 3.1% spending on primary care. And the specialists and the hospital systems are where the rest of that medical spend is. So we have the sort of highest cost, lowest performing system. And of course, that translates nationwide too, but particularly in rural areas, you have this magnification of the poisonous food environment, okay? We don't have Whole Foods, that choice. We have the food desert environment magnified by I'm not going to name names here, but the grocery ecosystem, is horrible for patients to go to the store, and what you have to subject yourself to walking past and just grabbing your, we give the advice, go get your vegetables, go around, get your meat, get your fruits, and then get out. Don't go in the aisles. But that problem of the food poison in the food system is magnified in rural areas, and you sort of are combining that with, the lack of exercise, and the culture is really, it's just difficult for patients to be able to combat all of that. So on the patient side, there's the environmental side, but on the system side, we have value-based care. I'm not saying we don't have this ship that's just very slowly trying to right itself in a very, very slow kind of way, but we don't have an integrated system. As I remember when I spoke with both of you on the phone, I'm so impressed with what you were telling me about, hey, I can just pull my specialist in right here into my Epic and get an opinion for this patient right here. In an integrated system, you have the ability to do those things. We have this extremely fragmented, siloed, that primary care providers have so much they're supposed to be doing during the day, and it's very difficult to be proactive in that care. And so what we've been working on building at PreventScripts is helping providers understand where patients are in terms of readiness for behavior change. What is their stage of change? Are they in a pre-contemplative? Are they in a contemplative stage, or are they stage of action? And you can't take a patient who's in a pre-contemplative stage of change and have them do all these things, do the remote monitoring, do the scale, do the connected cuff, that patient needs a different kind of approach. And so what we've worked on doing is building a stratification system for primary care providers to help them meet patients where they are, and then accordingly enroll patients in behavior change interventions that are reimbursable interventions that are able to improve prevention revenues as a preventive service line within primary care practices and at scale.
So next question, we like to talk about unlocking efficiency here. So let's talk a little bit about unlocking rural primary care efficiency. Given some of the unique challenges of rural medicine, what do you think can be done to help those delivering primary care to be more efficient?
What we learned in our early pilots is that primary care providers would say to us, as patients are coming in, I don't know which patients are interested in an intervention and which patients are, that's not what they want to talk about today. They're interested, they have a sinusitis, or they have a, particular GYN problem. And what we wanted to do is help primary care providers stratify patients according to that readiness to change, such that at the point of care, a more productive conversation can be had around behavior change. And then to unlock this pathway of remote monitoring such that patients could do a lot of this behavior change work on their own. And our product helps patients with goal setting in between their provider visits, utilizing the 5A preventive counseling behavior change pathway, such that these are the same things that providers might be doing in a visit, is overcoming barriers and setting goals. But we help push that system along by enabling patients to remotely assess their goals and reiterate their goals and reset their goals. And then patient and provider come together in that monthly remote monitoring interaction. And what we're trying to find is that perfect mix of patient self-management. Patients are self-tracking and setting their own goals with that provider interaction monthly, which we know is so necessary for sustained behavior change. And what we're really going for is permanent behavior change.
No, really great, really helpful. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I was thinking, Natalie, like what you were saying there is, you guys have found a way to, create something within the current confines of like the way the healthcare system kind of works, is reimbursed and that sort of thing. Like, do you think, I'm sure this may be a loaded question, but there's probably changes that are needed in like kind of the reimbursement model, you gave that stat of the 3% of the spend in the Kentucky area is on primary care and 97% is on all that other stuff. What do you think, what aspects of this do you think need to be changed going forward, to be able to leverage more of these types of, digitally enabled tools between traditional check-ins, inclusive of what PreventScripts does, but also just, other things that could be done to manage chronic conditions and provide better health. Do you have some thoughts around that?
It feels to me like that's going to be attacked on multiple fronts. And as you all know, everyone is trying to move to value, but yet we have this fee for service sort of base, right? It's sort of this base. And so it's this transition, and everyone is gradually transitioning. You might have some markets where there's intense competition that the transition is happening faster and in full risk, environments. But I think for primary care, we need to continue that transition and have a stability and enable providers to take on more upside risk, and how we enable providers to have more confidence in upside risk is with these tools that help patients help themselves get their blood pressures down. We're seeing, 12% reduction in systolic blood pressure, 13% reduction in diastolic blood pressure, clinically significant weight loss that patients are able to attain using our program. So it's sort of like providers are saying, well, show me the money, They want to take on upside risk, but they need help in having the confidence to sign these contracts. And so that is what is going to be necessary for this value-based care transition to really happen. On the shared savings side, those two quality measures that are at least what we're seeing, the bane of existence, are the reduction in A1Cs for your diabetics and the reduction in blood pressures for hypertensive patients. That those are the quality measures that, at least what we're hearing, are most pressing for 2024. Those are numbers we have to get down in order to leverage upside risk and in order to help our patients be better.
Yeah, no, I think well said. I think the crux of this is like, we got to find a way to be able to treat, even the big hitters of healthcare, like you mentioned, hypertension, diabetes. If you just take those two, which would drastically prevent downstream problems like heart attacks, strokes, etc. And if we can have models with really good tools, really good technology that's seamless for both the clinical teams and the patients, I think it'll be a much brighter future. And I'm hoping the reimbursement models and everything can also, come along with it and follow suit. I'd say it's going to be an uphill battle, but I'm confident we'll get there eventually.
It feels like there's a new system that's emerging to me. You guys have sort of been in these large systems that are integrated and have the integrated payer with the provider. It feels to me like there's emerging systems that are coming to play. The Aledade network and the Privia's network and ChinMed. And, there's these merging value equations, of course, One Medical and Amazon. I think that cannot be ignored that is happening. And I think primary care providers are really in somewhat of a bind because, what are you going to do? All of those consumer approaches are coming together and creating value, and then we've got the Nooms and the Weight Watchers with the GLP-1 drugs now. So, if you're going to stay in the game, I think you have to take a consumer approach, or we're going to be losing these patients to the consumer networks. And so that's a big threat now, I think, for all of us that are providers.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Now, thank you for that perspective, and thanks for sharing your story and the PreventScripts story, and then, us delving into, some of those problems that are somewhat unique, or not somewhat unique, but uniquely unique to rural medicine as well. I mean, I think let's wrap this up today like we always like to do with our guests, where we get to ask you some fun questions. So you get to relax now and just kind of answer off the cuff. There'll be quick questions. We didn't prep these ones with you. I intentionally left those blank so it could be more fun. You ready to go for the Nerd Alert lightning round?
Yes, Nerd Alert. I love it.
Cool. So first one, what hobby? I mean, you mentioned a lot of stuff you have done in the past, but do you have any hobbies currently outside of work life?
Well, I think I told you my grand finale was playing in Carnegie Hall my junior year in college. I literally did not pick that instrument up. But I have, in recently joining my local symphony board, independent board in the past year, our Paducah Symphony, I have been invited to play in a concert, a music in medicine concert by our conductor. And I am so scared. I'm going to have to start practicing. So there's some physicians on the board, and they all play. I'm the only one that has to start practicing. They all still are physician musicians. And so that is something I'm going to be working on in the next year as I send my youngest baby off to college. We'll be an empty nester. We'll be empty nesters.
Very cool. Love the pull back to music, that you started off with. Do you have a favorite book or a recent book you've read that you would particularly recommend to listeners?
I'm pulling up my Amazon right now, my Kindle right now, to tell you the books I'm reading. I'm reading 6 books. I'm going to rattle them off. Okay. These are any doctor that is seeing patients, any person that has anything to do with a patient needs to read all of these books. Number 1, Innovative State by Anish Chopra. Number 2, Good Energy by Casey Means, an ENT surgeon who gave it all up to do metabolic health in her practice. Legacy by Dr. Blackstock. A Black physician reckons with racism in medicine. Magic Pill by Johan Hari. The extraordinary benefits and disturbing rise of the new weight loss drugs. And Ravenous by Henry Dimbleby. about our toxic food system and what we can do about it.
Man, I think every one of those books you just mentioned has some aspect of what you talked about today on the podcast. So kudos to you for being able to juggle that many books too. That's impressive to me. But no, those are great. We'll make sure to share that list as well. Now, I think like Dale mentioned, we talk about efficiency on here and that sort of thing. And we always like to find out a little bit about, do the guests have something that they just love? So is there something, and this could be a piece of tech or it could just be whatever. This is very open-ended, but is there something that you feel like you could not live without if someone took it away from you today?
I mean, I self-track using my own software, and I use it, and it helps me keep me where I need to be. And I'm not like the skinniest person in the world, I'm sort of living here in this sort of geographically worst place that you can live, right? And sort of managing to sort of hang on to sort of a high normal BMI, somehow. And so I use our PreventScripts software to track my weight, and it helps me sort of keep me in check. And I'm not someone that really needs to lose, but I'm someone that needs to maintain and not develop type 2 diabetes. I've got as strong of a family history as probably anybody does, with mother, brother, uncles, grandfather, type 2. We've got a strong type 1 history in our family as well, which there's nothing I can do about that. But that is one thing that I use every day that helps me change my behavior and goal set.
Yeah. Practicing what you preach. I love it. It's the perfect example. Well, and the last question here is, do you have any, this is kind of along travel, so obviously shifting gears, but I like this kind of question, but do you have a bucket list or a place that is coming up on your travel itinerary that you either want to go to or have planned to go to?
2 places. My daughter lives in Paris, so I'm super excited she married a French boy, and she will be in France for another year. And so I'm hoping to get the chance to go and visit them in Paris sometime in the next year. And that's on the personal side, that's sort of a bucket list. I've been there several times before, but returning and meeting my new family will be exciting. And there is another bucket list thing that we may get to do, which is a trade show, an exporting trade show for Kentucky companies that are looking to export into the Middle East. And that is a trade show in Dubai that's coming up in the fall that will be exciting. What's exciting about that also is many of their healthcare systems are paid for by government. So it's a little bit of a different kind of angle because the princes pay for the healthcare in many of these Middle Eastern countries, and they have as bad of hypertension and metabolic syndrome as anyone has. So that's a super exciting trip coming up for us in the fall.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. Well, I mean, Natalie, I really appreciate you taking time to be on the show and chat with us today. Do you have any parting words that you would like to wrap things with?
Parting words. I'm optimistic. I leave this conversation with optimism, and I mentioned this sort of the ship is slowly righting itself. It feels very, very slow to me, but I feel optimistic because in terms of our customers, they're able to help patients faster, better, remotely. And when you look at sort of a population level that's really engaged in using, a tech-enabled service product like ours at PreventScripts, you're able to leverage your own brain. It's like the sort of the knowledge graph of what's in the doctor's brain. It's all on the patient's phone. They're using this system. You're checking in with them once a month. They're stepping on the scale. They're checking their blood pressure. They're doing all these things. And then you're able to leverage that data and help them in a monthly program, it really feels like the potential to really scale that up in a way that's integrated with electronic health records. It's real and it's right there. So sort of the promise of this scalable population level behavior change to me is happening and can happen, and we can be doing this for millions and 10 millions of people.
Yeah, I agree. I share that optimism as well. I think Dale does too.
I went from millions to 10 millions.
Yeah. Hey, there's no trouble with that. Well, awesome again, Natalie. Really appreciate you taking the time. And wish you we're recording this right before Memorial Day weekend in the U.S. And wish you a happy Memorial Day. And thanks again for being a guest on the show.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, Nerd MDs.
You bet. Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast by Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold.